Hi, everybody. It's CC and JT from the CC and JT Amateur Hour. This one's CC. I'm the JT part of this. And what we do here on our Amateur Hour is every other week we post a podcast of an author where we meet and discuss their works. And CC and I are particularly happy to have this one because we've been looking forward to this one for a while. And we are welcoming Laurie Kaye to the podcast. Laurie is what we would call in my generation a rock and roll warrior. There's just no other way to say it, a rock and roll warrior. And to have this important book about a defining era in American music is just fantastic. And having the literary sculptor of that book on our podcast is double exciting. So Laurie Kaye, take it away. Tell us about yourself and tell us about your book.
Well, good to meet you both. And my book is Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper, My Life Leading Up to John Lennon's Last Interview. And it's the story of my rock radio related life and career wrapped around what tragically turned out to be John's last interview, which I co-conducted for RKO Radio. And it ended mere hours before he was shot and killed just outside the Dakota. And it was, of course, his last day on the planet, December 8th, 1980. And I was unbelievably able to spend a major part of that day with him and Yoko. And that was so cool. And I felt like I'd begun to make lifetime friends. We made plans at the end of the interview to get together in another couple weeks in San Francisco. We were going to go out to Yoko's favorite Japanese restaurant there and eat sushi together and talk about personal things. And sadly, of course, that couldn't happen because John was shot and killed mere hours after our get-together.
It's just wild that you had that experience. I mean, the coincidence of that happening on that day, which I guess in a way was not a coincidence because the person who did it obviously had plans. But the book isn't just about your interview with John Lennon, and it's a lot about how you come together, how experiences came together in your life to kind of put you on the road that led you there. So your experiences growing up in a dysfunctional household played a large part in how you began your fascinating work in radio and music journalism. You also mentioned at one point in your book that you wished you'd had more supportive parents, more like some of your friends. If you'd had a more traditional family life, do you think you would have still become a writer, or would you have chosen a different career path?
Well, actually, I can't help but think that if I had encouraging and concerned parents, I wouldn't have made my way up to the early and cool rock radio career that I did. No doubt I wouldn't have started working so young and so hard in my life like I did end up doing, which helped keep me separated from my family. And I was starting out as an employed junior high school student, but if we'd been a family together, instead I would probably have relaxed and vacationed and spent lots more time with them instead of eventually working both days and nights like I did at radio stations like KFRC AM in San Francisco, which of course I write all about in my book.
And you also mentioned that the father of one of your friends was a big fan of the song American Pie, which I think people of our generation are very familiar with particular. But he seemed particularly moved by the lyric, "The Day the Music Died," probably due to the fact that he remembered the tragic plane crash that took the lives of the Big Bopper, Richie Valens, and Buddy Holly. Is there a specific song that you now relate to in the same way after what happened with your experience with John Lennon?
Well, I can't help but think of Elton John's song, Empty Garden, Hey, Hey, Johnny. The song is actually a tribute to John Lennon, who'd been killed 18 months before it came out. Plus, Here Today, song written by Paul McCartney in mid-1980, was a tribute to Paul's relationship with John, and he said the song was composed in the form of an imaginary conversation that they might have had. They're both great.
Oh, that's wonderful. I know Elton John, not only that one, but also Candle in the Wind, that became something of a tribute to Princess Diana in similarly tragic situation. So there are definitely songs that we relate to for those reasons. The loss of John Lennon turned out to be a pivotal moment in your personal life that made pursuing your beloved career feel even harder for you, I think. At the same time, the music industry as a whole was transitioning with events like the backlash against disco in 1979 and the birth of MTV in 1981. Do you feel the cultural shift affected your work as much as the fact that you were the last person to have interviewed John Lennon?
It's definitely my depression, plus the guilt I felt that affected my entire life after John was shot and killed mere hours after our December 8th, 1980 interview. I still feel guilty for not reporting that creep who accosted and followed me once I left the Dakota, since he turned out to be John's asshole assassin. And if I'd let the Dakota Security Department know, they might have realized that that creep was carrying a gun in the pocket of the coat he was wearing, which I didn't. And I, of course, never say or write down his name because I don't want to publicize him ever.
That's a completely understandable sentiment. I can't imagine how you must feel after that situation, because I believe both JT and I and everybody who was around at that time, we were all deeply affected as people who grew up with John Lennon's music. So it is tragic, and I'm sure it's that much harder for you. But to change to maybe a little bit of a lighter note, you've interviewed many amazing artists over the years. Who were some of your favorites and why?
Well, I've interviewed so many people over the years. It's so great. And I totally dug interviewing everyone from the Ramones and the Talking Heads in late 1977, since they could both tell me about punk and new wave rock and roll and performing at CBGB's in New York, which I eventually ended up living practically next door to in the mid-80s in New York. Plus my interviews with George Harrison in late 1978, and then Paul and Linda McCartney and their latest lineup of Wings in London in June 1979, followed by producer George Martin in early San Francisco at KFRC. Well, they were all incredible and led me up to the time that my RKO team and I got to spend with John Lennon and Yoko Ono at the Dakota. And afterwards, one of my major favorite interviews was a huge one with Little Richard Penniman for Rock Magazine. He talked so much about the Beatles and so many other rock stars that impressed him, too. And plus, I loved my interviews with my idols like David Bowie and Mick Jagger. I can't even think of any interviews that weren't exciting for me and didn't pay off.
That's so much fun. That's so much fun. I mean, you're just going through not only the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by talking about these folks, you're going through our personal Rock and Roll Hall of Fames, the music. I think it was Dick Clark that basically said, the soundtrack of our lives was this music. And so it was just amazing to have someone on the front line, so to speak, to talk about that. Let me ask one off topic question just very quickly. Do you feel blessed? Or do you feel, was this the life you wish you could have led?
Well, I definitely love my life, and I love the way it turned out, and I love writing about it to let people know. It's been very exciting for me.
Okay.
So, along with all the interviews, hold on, there's one more. What are some of the most treasured of your collected memorabilia?
Ooh, there's a
Because
good
you've
question.
picked up a few things over the years.
You probably have just shelves. I can see, just from the pictures, you have shelves of memorabilia.
Well, I've had a lot of honest to goodness writer moments myself. And a number of them, starting as a senior in high school when my advanced placement English teacher told me I would definitely be a successful writer. And then in journalism school at UC Berkeley, my professor told me I was already a talented writer and I didn't need to take any classes, so I should just get an internship instead. And it would no doubt lead to a gig right away so I could quit college and start making money. And that's exactly what I did, thanks to KFRC AM in San Francisco.
That's amazing.
So, who is your writing role model?
Well, I've interviewed so many talented rockers and authors who wrote incredible memoirs. Everyone from Beatles producer George Martin, who co-authored his great book, All You Need Is Ears, and rock star Little Richard Penniman, who co-authored his memoir, The Life and Times of Little Richard, the authorized biography. That was great. Plus, my friend Pamela DeBar is the most well-known female author to have written a memoir about her sexual experiences with rock stars, most famously in her 1987 book, I'm with the Band, Confessions of a Groupie, which I found totally inspirational. And to be honest, I have plenty more writing role models whose work absolutely excites and thrills me, and I still keep all their books on my shelves and go through them as often as I can.
So, what do you love about writing?
Well, I love realizing that thanks to writing, my memoir especially, I'll be letting readers know all about my life and career and everything that's ever educated or excited me. Basically, sex and drugs and rock and roll. And writing about other people makes me feel super informed, aware, and cultured. So it's great to be able to mention and describe them all.
So, and then to the flip side, what do you absolutely dread about writing?
Well, I sometimes worried about forgetting something important or someone's name who played an important role in my life, and when they did so, too. But I've been lucky and remembered almost everything and everybody, thank goodness. And luckily enough, I was able to contact coworkers and friends of mine and ask them questions if I wasn't sure, so they could definitely support me, and I made sure I got it right.
So, I kind of know what this answer to this next question may be, but from a writing perspective, what single significant life experience affects your writing, good or bad?
Well, no doubt being raised by a dysfunctional family, including my violent mother, affected my writing in a freaky way, mainly because she never showed any interest at all or even ever checked out my work, even after I became super successful. It was so freaky. I had to wait to be acknowledged as a great writer by teachers and professors, like I mentioned to you, in high school and college, plus lots of friends and their families, and eventually plenty of fans and admirers who are really complimentary about my book. And it's so cool to have readers say to me, "Gee, Laurie, when we read books, usually just a few pages at a time, but your book, we want to read all at once." So that makes me feel great, and I'm glad you agree.
Yes.
Would you recommend the writing life to a loved one? Why?
Would I recommend a writing life? Well, yes, writing makes it totally possible for anyone to let people know whatever they want to tell them about yourself or what you're incredibly interested in. It pays off and can make you feel super skilled and accomplished, which it really did for me. Even though I'd done so much writing before my book came out, this has made me feel incredible.
That's an excellent answer. So, what is something unexpected in your past that we won't find in your bio?
Well, you won't find out anything about my very first marriage, which was surprisingly upsetting and ended in divorce. And actually, the only thing I did write about it in my bio was that I'd reached out to Little Richard Penniman, who'd offered during our interview in the mid-'80s to conduct my wedding ceremony when I did want to get married. But when I called him later, after I'd been asked to get married, 1992, Little Richard told me he wasn't doing that anymore. So instead, though, I was lucky to get the late, great Mojo Nixon, who wrote and recorded the terrific song Elvis is Everywhere, which I named a chapter in my book after. He became my wedding officiant. It was so super cool. And then years later, Mojo read my book just before it was published, and he totally dug it. And he gave me a really cool complimentary comment that ended up on the back cover of my book. So complimentary. So I was very sorry when I heard that Mojo died last year, because I've been a huge fan of his, loved talking to him, and I loved his song, Elvis is Everywhere.
Yeah. Wow. What? That's great. There's just no other word for it. So we're coming to the end of our questions. So before we sign off here, Laurie, tell us where we can find your book and where we can buy it.
Well, the cool thing to do for people who are interested would be to go to my website, my book's website and my website, confessionsofArockandrollnamedropper.com, because there's a whole segment on it that says purchase that will show you where you can get it online and what stores, not just all over the country, but around the world in England. For example, if you're in London or anywhere else in the UK, you can go to Waterstones bookstores and they carry it, or Amazon UK. But in America, of course, Amazon and I believe Walmart has it online still as well, and so many other places, including from my publisher. But right now, actually, Amazon does have the least expensive price. Not that much less, but it's not that expensive in the first place. So that's a good place to get it. And I love it when people, even if they don't order it from Amazon, will please leave an online 5-star book review, which you can do even if you don't order it from them. And that's great because it helps promote my book, which I'm really happy when people do.
Excellent.
Also on my website, there are so many cool reviews, not just from readers, but from people in magazines and hosts of podcasts and radio and TV shows, which are also on the website too. So it's a cool thing for people to check out.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming on here. And definitely, I enjoyed reading your book very much and did leave reviews in a couple places for you. So hopefully those are helpful. But thank you again for being here. And we really appreciate it. We're very excited to have learned more about writing this book because it was such a really meaningful book, I think.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to hear that from you both.
Thank you. And we're glad to have you on board. We were just so blessed to talk to Laurie Kaye here about her time as a rock and roll warrior. You can find you can find this podcast of Laurie and her writing colleagues out on our website at www.carsonhume.com, and of course our social media where we will be posting all these things. But for now, again, Laurie, thank you.
And have a great day, everyone.